Hey everybody, welcome to Kent with Bent 119. Kent is here now, which of course is based on the wonderful movie I Am Here Now, written, directed, starring, and produced by Neil Breen, in which Neil Breen plays alien, time-traveling AI Cyber Jesus. You might
And I
think,
think he's a hacker too, isn't he?
well, I mean, if you're already AI Cyber Jesus, you better be a
Yeah.
hacker. And you might think that this is an exaggeration, but in the very first scene of the movie, he comes down from the sky to land in the Nevada desert with stigmata circuit boards taped to his chest and limbs, and then he shapeshifts into an alien, and later in the movie he says he's an advanced AI from the future. So, it's it's quite the thing.
Sounds like a great movie.
It is. It's a wonderful movie.
I love Neil
Royland,
Breen.
Royland, who's been a member for 17 months, is at the tetrapod level, sends Cecil Tunicate, love Dapper, that's true. AIG is a bag of dicks, but also sends a Godzilla emoji, so we will take a drink for that. And then Silent Tetrapod just gifted 10 memberships.
Wow.
So let's hit the increment there. So Wayne Gaffney, Morena AIF. Oh, that's an AI from the future right there. That's Cyber Jesus. Missing Mod, Alien Bird. Whoa, I just messed it up for myself. There it is. Shield Bunny and Don Kylan. Oh, wait, one more. Mainstreamer, Inobi Way, and Fragmag were all gifted memberships. Thank you very much, everybody. Let's take some drinks. 1, 2. I just did one too many times. 3. Yeah, okay, we're good. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And this should only go up one more time. I don't know what I'm going for, but 9 and 10. There we go. Well, there's good news and bad news. The good news is, hey, we're here for Kent with Bent. Bad news is, I am not feeling well at all. I've spent most of the day unconscious, or eating chicken noodle soup, or... No, that pretty much covers it.
That's terrible.
Yeah, no, it's been a rough day. So what we're gonna do here is we are, first I'm drinking tea right now, and I will switch over to ginger beer. So, sorry, but I do not need to compound like a hangover on top of me being rather ill on top of this.
Right.
So, first time ever, I'm in fact playing along with non-alcoholic beverages. And I know it feels like a little bit of a betrayal from me, but, between already existing aches and fatigue and GI discomfort, I feel like maybe my liver can take the day off.
Yeah, I think people will understand.
Yeah. It also means that if you're one of the people who likes to hang out for Power Rangers, yeah, we're not doing that tonight. After we get out of here, I am going to, just go to my room and fall asleep as fast as human, or as ceratosaurously possible. There you go. Sorry, I almost missed specied myself.
Oops.
All right. Have I been tested? I'm presuming it means for corona. I have, other than a little bit of brain fog, I have literally none of the corona symptoms. So I very much doubt this is corona. So there you go. But we're not here to have a pity party for Dapper Dinosaur. We are instead here to talk about Kent Hovind. So I'm going to take a second to go over our drinking rules that I will be following, even though, yes, I know, rather hypocritically, there is no alcohol in either of my beverages today. Either this tea or this ginger beer, despite the name. Ginger beer, in fact, has no beer. Or, I mean, alcohol. It has... this doesn't have beer in it either as an ingredient. Whatever, you guys know what I mean. Can you tell there might be a little bit of brain fog going on? Maybe?
A little bit.
Just a little bit, yeah. Alright, so... we take a drink, as you've already seen, whenever anyone sends anything to the effect that AIG or a bag of dicks as either a super chat or a membership milestone chat, or puts in a milestone or super chat any of the kaiju emojis. Now that's Godzilla, King Ghidorah, and Mothra. Now, you do have to be a little bit clever. If you remember, you do get easy access to the AIG's Bag of Dicks emoji, which is literally a bag of eggplants labeled AIG, which is, I personally find quite amusing. I made it myself for that reason. Um, Otherwise, you do have to come up with a clever way to get around the YouTube censors, who do not like you to simply type into chat that AIG is a bag of dicks. They will censor that. So you have to be a little creative. We will also take a drink anytime anyone gifts memberships. So we saw that Silent Tetrapod gifted 10 memberships. We took 10 drinks, even if I didn't hit the increment drink number button correctly the whole way. Because again, a little bit of brain fog maybe. DM, where's the butler's wing? Hashtag Triconodont Justice says betrayal from Dapper Dinosaur. I'm not doing the bit again. I'm just not ready to use another channel change. And then there's Godzilla. We'll take a drink for the Godzilla. Now, I do know that some platforms have a little bit of trouble getting the emojis in on Super Chats, so we're pretty generous with people not getting it right. So we'll take a drink for Godzilla. There it is. Man, I drank a lot of that tea really fast. Now I've got that like warm feeling sitting at the bottom of like my neck, like, ooh, maybe you drank a little bit too much of that boiling water too fast. It's not actually boiling, but still. Okay. But we will also take drinks anytime Mothra or Godzilla come by audibly, which might happen, it might not. When it comes to Kent, we'll take drinks. When Kent says something that's so stupid, we just kind of have to drink. When he gets something right, but it can't just be him quoting someone else who's getting something right. He actually has to have the correct thought and then express it himself in his words. Otherwise, it doesn't count. We'll also take a drink anytime Kent Hovind tells a joke that doesn't land or tells a story that didn't happen. So, for instance, if he confuses a conversation he had with his shampoo bottle with a conversation he might have had with a hypothetical Berkeley professor on a hypothetical airplane to nowhere, apparently, we'll take a drink for that. We'll also take a drink anytime Kent Hovind mentions the National Socialist German Workers' Party, prominent members or leadership figures therein, or various of their historically significant activities, especially in the first half of the 20th century. If you don't know who the NSDAP are, feel free to Google it, and also not put it in my chat, because that's one of those places, it's one of those things YouTube likes to just take away your monetization. So, yeah, there you go. We'll also take a drink if we're not sure what's going to happen next, but either Bent or I can successfully predict the next thing that Kent is going to talk about as an argument. It's a successful prediction. We also have Trojan source. If Kent cites a source and we check on the source, and not only does it fail to support his point, but actively contradicts his point, we'll take a drink. Now, this almost never happens for Kent Hovind because, I mean, Kent Hovind's source is almost always some guy I'm going to give you the phone number of said it 30 years ago. Like, oh, okay, cool. Lance Hall for $10 says, Fail Logic Toonie Kent makes the super chat go vroom. Get better soon, Dapper. Thank you very much. I really do appreciate that. Okay, but hey, you know what? This is one of those, like, the show must go on situations, and unlike normal people in showbiz, I don't have an understudy, so I should get one of those. Who would be a good... Chat, put in suggestions for who would be a good Dapper Dino understudy. Who could fill my shoes temporarily? Perhaps not as well as I do, but, like, passably well. We also have Ad Hominid. Ad Hominid is a one-time drink trigger per stream. It probably won't come up this time because I don't think it's on topic. But if a creationist ever confuses Lucy, the Australopithecus, for just all of her species, Australopithecus afarensis, or just all of Australopithecus, the genus, we take a drink for Ad Hominid. I believe that covers all of them. Bent, what did I forget?
You didn't forget any. In fact, you had one rule I didn't know about, ad hominid.
Yeah, we only recently added it. And we made it a one-time drink trigger because anytime it happens, it's about to happen constantly for like the next 20 minutes. And I don't want to just chug a drink for like 20 minutes straight. So it's a one-time drink trigger there. Ad hominid. All right. I think with that, we don't have anything else to stand on unless there's something you want to tell people about.
Nope.
Actually, it's come up a little bit. Bent, how's the car?
Car's great. It's running fine. Better
Awesome.
than ever.
Awesome.
I've got it back, and I'm happy about it. And I'm grateful for everyone's donations and support.
DM, where the butler's wing, Triconodont Justice says the other Dapper Dinosaur, if he's still doing YouTube. I actually looked at his channel a little while back. I think his last video was like 3 months ago. So I don't know. Seems like he's he still uploads every once in a while, but it's like the gap has gone from a few weeks to a few months. So yeah. And honestly, I just checked it because I was thinking about Robert Carter, mixing him up with me, and I was like, I wonder how that guy's doing. And he's still getting decent video views on his videos. He's just not uploading too much. So here we go. Now, Kent, I should mention, we're talking about the Grand Canyon, and Kent is about to talk about the Kaibab uplift and about the fact that the Kaibab uplift, the top of that uplift, is higher than the source of the Colorado River, which runs through the Grand Canyon, which is true. Fits of Rage for $5 says, drink counter already getting me on my way to giving these mosquitoes alcohol poisoning. Nice. P.S. AIG are the animals that cause the Ediacaran extinction. Oh, I know what that means. I'll take a drink for that. In case you guys are wondering, that's priapulid worms. And you know that priapulid worms are named after the Greek god Priapulus, who was literally a fertility god, and more specifically, the god of gigantic dicks. In art, he usually wheelbarrows his penis around because it's too big, or it's carried between a bit of cloth by like some flying cherubs or something. Like it's literally too big to just let loose. And so that's what priapulid worms are named after. It's also what priapism is named after, which is what happens if you know that warning on like ED medications, like, oh, if your erection lasts more than 4 hours, seek medical attention. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's because that's a priapism. And you know what the medical treatment is for that?
What do I want to know?
Lancing.
Oh.
You just put a hole in there and drain the blood that way.
Sounds really terrible.
Yeah. Fun fact, it can also be caused by certain head injuries. It can just cause your nervous system to go a little crazy and suddenly, bam, priapism. So, wear a helmet out there, guys. It's dangerous. All right, now that we've talked far more about penises than I was expecting, here's Kent, who is also has some similarities to, say, a penis worm.
This picture with the white shows, that's what's called the snow line. Between these two red lines is what's called the Kaibab uplift. Mm-hmm. Now, Grand Canyon, it cuts right across the middle of a ridge, sort of like a long, narrow mountain called a ridge. If you push the carpet up against the wall, it would wrinkle. That would make a ridge.
You know, he's actually not too wrong here. He's basically getting this right. We'll take a drink for it. That does, in fact, cause ridges. The Kaibab uplift is, in fact, a currently forming ridge.
Grand Canyon is a slice right across a ridge called the Kaibab uplift. Okay.
Keep that name in mind. Kaibab, what was it?
Kaibab uplift.
Uplift. Okay. That uplift, I'm pretty sure, will become important later on.
Okay.
Or as the kids might say, that's a tool we'll use later.
Kaibab, Kaibab. The top of the Kaibab uplift, that ridge, is roughly 7,000 or 8,000 feet above sea level. Way up there. Now the bottom of the canyon, where the river is only 1,800 feet above sea level, so it's more than 1 mile deep. Absolutely gigantic canyon. How many of you have ever seen the Grand Canyon?
Quick, how many of you have seen the Grand Canyon? We've got to put in a poll. Because one of the rules, it's not a drinking rule, it's just a general rule, is that we have to ask our audience if they've, like the questions Kent asks his audience. But I'm not going to say how many, I'm just going to say, have you seen the Grand Canyon? Okay. Oh, come on. So please feel free to vote. I also noticed that we have 81 people watching, but only 31 likes, which unfortunately means that I like less than half of you, half as well as you deserve. So if you would like me to like all of you as well as you deserve, please hit like. So there you go. And we'll hit play.
Huge hole in the ground, unbelievable. 180 or 200 miles long between those two red lines. This is a picture from a satellite.
Lance Hall asks, what's the source of Kent's unusual pronunciations? So, I don't know. It doesn't match onto any regional dialect that I'm familiar with from the United States. I suspect it could be like a combination of him having lived in various places and like picked up subtle aspects of different regional dialects, as well as the possibility that there might be some kind of Christian sociolect that I'm not terribly familiar with that exists within like independent fundamentalist Baptist circles, but I'm not aware of any other IFB types speaking that way. So I'm really not sure. I've tried to figure it out, although not, very hard. Yeah, I don't actually know. Maybe it's just a thing that he did to be distinctive. And I mean, it works, right? Whenever anyone pronounces things like Kenthoven, you know where they got that pronunciation from.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know. It could be intentional. It could be a combination of dialects and a weird, like, Christian sociolect I'm unfamiliar with. I don't know. I mean, I know that my personal idiolect has had influences from different regional dialects of American English. For instance, I tend to default to y'all for a second-person plural pronoun. And that's from the relatively short time that I spent in the South, living in South Carolina. But I liked it, so I kept it. But, yeah, I don't know.
The river enters the canyon up at the far right corner at 2,800.
You can call it the northeast corner, Kent, because, you can arrange a map any way you want. I'm just going to point that out, right? In fact, actually, there's an RPG that at some point I'd like to get a hold of, although I'm a little annoyed at one of the creators because I did ask for an interview, and rather than saying no, I just no response at all. But it's set in a alternate history North America, and the map has south at the top. So, yeah, like that. It's completely arbitrary which direction you put at the top of your map. It does not matter.
Feet above sea level.
Oh, actually, historically, Christian maps made by Christians tended to put east at the top because the east was the direction from which Jesus was supposed to return. Because it's also the direction of the rising sun, and Jesus was supposed to return and bring light to the world like the rising sun. It's also why traditionally churches face east, with the altar at the east end of the church. It's also why in many Christian subcultures, I suppose, or groups, I don't know, the traditional direction to face during prayer is east. Yeah. The directionality of maps is it's a thing. North became the convention as a result of the age of sail and exploration, making it easier to do navigation that way, but ultimately it's arbitrary. Tiktaalik for 100 Argentinian pesos says, AIG e una bolsa de prongas. Is hey how you pronounce that? That's interesting. Let's see. P.S. Do get better soon. I know it's not easy to find an NA dino. Yeah, dino vets are hard to find. There's specialized bird veterinarians, but it's dude, I'm as closely related to a bird as you are to a platypus. That doesn't help a lot.
Not that close.
Yeah, it's really not. Savage Ray Comfort's editor Cobra says, I flew over the Grand Canyon today and I was struck by two things. First, its lack of a straight channel. Yeah. Second, it's not nearly large enough to contain the tumescent contents of the AIG bag. We'll take a drink. Thank you very much. All right, here we go.
And the river flows down to the bottom and left is the way it would flow from this angle here. So what we have here, as the river enters the canyon, it flows downhill, of course, and ends up at 1,800 feet above sea level. It drops about 1,000 feet. During that time, the ground is rising up. The Kaibab uplift is going uphill. Interesting. So I told this professor in this debate one time, I said, sir, did you know the top of the canyon is higher than the bottom?
Tiktaalik, I did know that G is usually pronounced for E and I in Spanish, and for some reason, which I'm going to blame on being ill and having brain fog, I, for some reason, was like, is this supposed to be Portuguese? And then I just ignored it and started, just reading it out. And then I went back and I was like, whatever. So I'm pretty sure I just forgot that it was supposed to actually be Spanish. Sorry about that.
I didn't know.
I'm not as on top of it as I normally am.
He said, yeah. I said, did you know the river only runs through the bottom?
Oh, this is a conversation that didn't happen. Take a drink.
I said, sir, the top of the canyon is higher than where the river enters the canyon by over 4,000 feet.
Yeah, that's true.
Rivers don't flow uphill.
It's true. Take a drink.
There's no delta. Where's all the mud that washed out of there? Usually when a river cuts through
So, I'll take a drink, didn't hit the plus button. So, the delta is in the Gulf of California in Mexico. It's not really a delta, but that's where the sediment is. Not all rivers have deltas. Many do not. Cannon, who's this is their first super chat on the channel. Thank you very much, Cannon, for $5. Says, if you don't mind, when we were at nuke school, I was there around 2014. Bent, my brain is fried. When about was that when we were in nuke school?
I was there in 2003, 2004.
Yeah, and I was there a little bit after you. So, like...
Probably a few months after me.
Yeah, only a few months. So about the same time.
So, yeah, 2004 for you.
Yeah.
Because I got there in December 2003.
Yeah, so it would have been about 2004 then. Yeah, that makes sense. Plus that lines up with, like, I think, like, a sophomore in, like, 2001 or something in, like, high school. And then they were, like, full up on, like, boot camp slots for a while. Because if you remember, after 2001, there was a surge of people trying to join the military. So, I was in that surge. As were you, I believe.
So was I.
Yeah, a lot of people who otherwise probably shouldn't have or wouldn't have joined the military in the years after 2001. DM, where's the Butler's Wing? Hashtag try Conadon Justice for $2 says, Brain Fog Dapper is still 10 times smarter than Kent. Yeah, well, it's a low bar. You know? It doesn't take a whole lot to be smarter than, like, a moldy sock.
You know, it makes a canyon or something, and all the mud that washes out is out at the outside. It flattens out into a delta.
No, it sometimes does. First of all, the Colorado River does not reach the ocean. It all dries up before that, and it has for, like, decades now. So, you can blame that primarily on the states of Wyoming, or not Wyoming, sorry, what is it? Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and Nevada for taking up the vast majority of that volume for their own uses for things like irrigation, water for municipalities, stuff like that. And I know we've gone over this before. But at this point, the river just doesn't make it all the way to the ocean. But when it did, it emptied into the Gulf of California, and there is plenty of sediment from the Grand Canyon right there in the Gulf of California. Kent could have just looked this up. He just chose not to. So, yeah, there you go. Now, when it comes to rivers don't flow uphill, Bent, do you remember the name of that ridge he was talking about? It was the Kaibab...
Uplift.
Uplift, right. Do you know what an uplift is? I mean, it's in the name.
It's when land is lifted up.
Right. So what if the land wasn't higher than the source of the canyon when the canyon started forming? But then the land started going up, and the river cut down into the land as it was going up, which is measurable and is, in fact, literally what's happening. Yeah, this is just Kent failing to understand how geomorphology works at the most basic of levels, right? If you've ever been on a hike or anything and you've seen like a river that's cutting through a landscape in a mountainous area, chances are that mountainous area is actually uplifting and the river is down-cutting as it uplifts, and often at about the same rate to keep the slope of the river about the same. That is what's happening in the Kaibab uplift area of the Grand Canyon. It's not mysterious. What did the multi-sock do to you? I don't know, it's just not very smart. Other than that. Yeah, that's it. Alright, we're gonna hit play.
Okay.
No delta for the Grand Canyon. There's no way that river made that canyon.
I mean, no one ever suspected that there should have been a delta per se, but the sediment's right there. Yeah.
So instead, a global flood made a regional canyon.
Right. Complete with switchbacks and meanders and barbed tributaries, all of which are impossible for flood runoff. So, and I would say you could go to Kent's own channel to watch the dam breach that he did on his own property, which resulted in a nice straight spillway. Unfortunately, or fortunately, that video, as far as I know, is no longer available because that channel got shut down by YouTube for numerous community guideline violations. Whoops. And interestingly enough, Kent blamed other Christians. He seemed to think that other Christians who don't like him are actually responsible for this. I have no idea, but My Infinite Journey for $2. My Infinite Journey for $2 says, Have we been to the Grand Canyon in person, or do pics count? Pics do not count. The have you been to the Grand Canyon has to be like in person. Yeah, that's what I'm going to argue. Flying over, it's going to be a judgment call. If you think that counts, it's good enough for me.
The flood made Grand Canyon. Probably in a few weeks. Certainly not millions of years. See,
there's no reason for you to say certainly not millions of years, because even if you said that all of the current explanations for the formation of the Grand Canyon don't work, which they do, but even if they didn't, that would not then be evidence that the flood worked, right? You would have to show how floodwaters running through this area could cause that canyon. That jagged, meandering canyon that includes switchbacks. Which is not what flood runoff does. Flood runoff, as we know from both Earth and Mars, interestingly enough, forms nice, relatively straight channels with only gentle bends. It leaves behind teardrop-shaped islands. There are often big ripple marks. That's always fun. And when I say big, I mean like, tens of meters tall, like 100 meters across, hundreds of meters long. Yeah, big ripples when it comes to big floods. None of that is evident at the Grand Canyon. So, yeah.
While the sediment layers were soft after the flood, the water could erode that very quickly.
There's a big problem with that. There's this thing called the Kaibab limestone. And limestone is very water soluble. And if this lime were not even lithified, it would be even more water soluble. So my question is, how is there exposed lithified limestone if everything is unlithified at the time the canyon is forming? And therefore, this is the stuff that's going to dissolve away. I mean, we're talking like, you ever see that cute little video where the raccoon puts the cotton candy in the water and it just disappears, and then the raccoon is just kind of stabbing around in the water like, hey, what the heck?
Yes.
Like, that's the kind of thing we're talking about for this unlithified limestone. It's just going to be gone. How does it survive, Kent? No answer. There's
a miracle.
Kent, I'm sure, hasn't even thought about the Kaibab limestone in terms of his unlithified sediment flood runoff hypothesis.
The Grand Canyon formed within a few years after the flood, because the Bible says in Psalm 104, the mountains arose, the valleys sank down, and the water rushed off. During this time...
Psalm 104, huh? Is that what he said?
Who knows?
Well, if we can
I didn't catch which psalm.
I think it was 104. So, Ben, do you have a favorite Bible version?
ESV.
ESV, huh? That's not bad. I rather like the ESV. ESV. There we go. All right. Bless the Lord, O my soul. O my God, you are very great. You are clothed with splendor and majesty, covering yourself with light as with a garment, stretching out the heavens like a tent. He lays the beams of his chambers on the water. He makes the cloud his chariots. He rides on the wings of the wind, and he makes his messengers winds. He ministers with flaming fire. He sent the earth on its foundations, so it should never be moved. You covered it in the deep as with a garment. The water stood above the mountains, and at your rebuke they fled, they being the waters. At the sound of your thunder they took flight. The mountains rose, the valleys sank down to the place you appointed for them. You set a boundary they may not pass, so that they might not again cover the earth. This is a creation narrative. When did God stretch out the heavens, according to basically everything in the Bible that mentions that God stretched out the heavens? It's during the creation of the world. This is not an account of the flood, Kent. I'm taking a drink. That is a Trojan source right there. Kent, you got the Bible wrong.
It's not the first time.
It's not the last time. It's the one thing you're supposed to be getting right. And the thing is, I already knew that that's what was going to happen because I'm familiar with this bit from Psalm 104 because it's a creation narrative. And it also, if as you might notice, is fully in line with the flat earth with a dome over it cosmology of the ancient Near East.
Oops.
Yeah. So that's why he lays the beam of his chambers on the waters. That's God setting up his heavenly temple in the waters above the earth in the cosmic ocean so that he can look down upon the earth like he does elsewhere in the Psalms with the earth as his footstool. Like, yeah. He set the earth on its foundations. Those are the foundations that hold it up within the chaotic waters of creation. And at your rebuke they fled, they being the waters, is when God separated the waters from the land in Genesis 1. This is not a part about the flood. If I felt better, I would express myself a little bit more emotively. Let's just say that. Instead, I'm trying to remain very calm because I'm a little I'm a little achy, and I don't want to make that worse.
And probably huge lakes were trapped by the mountains lifting up.
Look, if the mountains lifted up, you should... Here's the thing, right? I'm not going to say that you can't have mountain lift up in your flood model, whatever. But Kent, if you're going to try to give it a biblical source, you need to actually have a biblical source that's talking about the damn flood, not the creation narrative. Like, I do get it, right? It's just Kent being dishonest, right? He's read Psalm 104. He knows what it's about, or at least he did when he first read it. And he was just like, you know what? Just going to use it as a as a flood narrative anyway. Lance Hall for $5 said the fountains of the deep were switched from flow to suck. That's where the floodwater went. Nice. Excellent. Well done. All right.
And it would take several weeks or months or years for that lake to overflow its own, find the lowest point and overflow and make a spillway.
Yeah, Athercoon says the Bible as a Trojan source takes talent. Yeah, seriously. It's like the one thing I would never give Kent a break on is getting the Bible wrong. It's like why I always am infuriated every time he says that Timothy wrote 1st and 2nd Timothy. When it starts out as being addressed to Timothy by Paul. Now, granted, pretty sure Paul didn't write it either, but I'm extra sure that Timothy didn't.
And carve out Grand Canyon very quickly. Most of the river basins in the world were probably formed as the floodwater ran off during the last few months of the flood or during the first few years afterwards.
So then why aren't there canyons in all of those river basins, Kent? Why does the Grand Canyon seem so unique? Why is it world famous for being like the biggest and bestest canyon on Earth? What's special about it that wouldn't have affected all the other unlithified sediment? I don't know. I don't know. I have nothing. I can't imagine what there should be Grand Canyon style things all over the place. Now, granted, one of them would have to be biggest, right? And maybe it would be the Grand Canyon. But there should be of similar scale canyons all over the place. But there aren't. Like, he showed the Mississippi River drainage area. If there's one thing I know about the Mississippi, it's that it does not form a canyon. It is a very low relief river. It's very wide and does not go into a canyon. It is some of the flattest stuff you'll ever see. So, yeah.
There would be drainage patterns would have to be established, and as the water soaks out of the ground, gradually the ground would dry out and form the mountains and the rock layers that we have today.
How, Kent? No. What's causing that? Like, what is the mechanism uplifting these mountains? Because, normally... Well, yeah. Because the thing is that we actually do have good ideas as to what forms mountains. So, for instance, a lot of the Rockies are the result of uplift as a result of subduction of the Pacific Plate. The Atlas Mountains over in Africa, as well as the Appalachian Mountains, which are basically the same thing, are actually ancient folded mountains like you get in the Himalayas. And they've since eroded almost all the way down. So, how do you get two mountains, the Himalayas and the Appalachians, and I guess the Atlas Mountains, we'll include them too, of almost the same age? Because remember, they were both formed apparently within like a year of each other. Whereas one has been ground down to the point that it only barely counts as mountain ranges, and the other ones are the tallest peaks in the entire planet. What's the single unifying mechanism for this, Kent? And the answer is he doesn't have one. He's never thought about these things, right? But that's the problem. In science, you have to think about these things. If your explanation doesn't explain all the data that it should explain, then you need to go back and get a better explanation. it can incorporate your current explanation, but it has to account for as much data as possible. And Kent doesn't even attempt to explain it. So.
Okay. The Grand Canyon is what we call a washed-out spillway.
Kent, you've had washed-out spillways on your property, and you know they didn't look like the Grand Canyon. I'm just taking a drink for, like, this man who will sit there and watch a spillway form on his property because of a dam breach he intentionally caused, while, by the way, sitting in a canoe on that property, on that, flooded lake, which is a little dangerous, but still. And then put it up on YouTube publicly. Say, see, this is how the Grand Canyon formed. And then you look at it, and it looks nothing like the Grand Canyon. I'm just taking a drink.
Come on, Kent, you can do better.
Normally, ginger beer is a kind of harsh drink.
Yeah.
When I'm sick, though, that ginger, it's like manna from heaven.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. It's not like the quail flocks, though.
No,
because that was the other thing, right? Remember when they were all like, we're tired of all this manna, we want some meat. And so then God was like, all right, fine, here's quail that are just going to show up every day. We'll kill some.
I do remember. Sorry.
Yeah. That's from Exodus? I'm going to blame the brain fog for me not being terribly sure which book that is. It's probably the number? I don't know. Doesn't matter. It's from the Torah. Heather Kuhn for $5 says, the course of the Mississippi River also wanders all over the place and is affected by seismic activity. Yes. Yeah, that's an important thing to remember, is that there are millions of years worth of events that you can look at with different eruptions and lava flows and all sorts of stuff in the area. There's actually lava flows that flow into the canyon, which means they had to have erupted during the formation of the canyon, and then solidified under there, right? That's a whole thing. And Kent just doesn't take that into account. How did this lava form a coherent flow underneath a raging flood spillway with muck and mud instead of rock? Who knows?
Magic.
Have you ever seen a farmer's built a dam on his property like Grandpa has on his property up there in Arkansas? If the water goes over the top of the dam, it'll find the lowest point and start going over that spot. Once it starts going through, it cuts a little groove, and then more water's rushing through, so it cuts the groove deeper and wider, so more water comes through.
That's true. Take a drink.
Especially if you have a lot of debris like sand and gravel and rocks and tree stumps and trees. It becomes like liquid sandpaper. It goes rushing through and carves the canyon out just in a hurry. And we'll get into...
Okay, interesting analogy there. Sandpaper. Now, Bent, I'm not someone who does a lot of woodworking or anything, right? I just don't. It's fine.
Okay.
But I think you're a bit familiar with sandpaper. So
a little bit.
When you take sandpaper to something, does it cause it to become more jagged or less jagged?
Less jagged.
Okay.
I did it.
So if the floodwaters coming off to form the Grand Canyon were like liquid sandpaper, should they make a smooth or a jagged canyon?
Very smooth canyon.
Okay.
I can't believe how smooth it is.
I'm just taking a drink it should be like liquid sandpaper. Yeah, Kent, it would be like liquid sandpaper, which is a problem for you. Oh, goodness.
More of that on video number 6 of about the flood, what caused that. Anyway, Grand Canyon is simply a breached dam. It was...
So I will say, there is actually evidence of a dam breach near the source of the Grand Canyon. And it is currently the consensus that this initial dam breach did cause the first bit of erosion that then later led into the canyon. But it was not the majority of the erosion that has happened since then, nor did it completely establish the current path of the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon. So, was there a dam breach involved in the history of the Grand Canyon? Yes. Did that dam breach cause the entirety of the canyon? No, not even close. Also, there's you might not remember it, but when we were at the Grand Canyon, there were samples of rocks on the Trail of Time. I don't remember if you remember that.
Mm-hmm.
But they were, sorry, they were there. You could touch them, and they all had labels. Sorry. One of these was labeled Surprise Canyon Supergroup Conglomerate. It was one of the specific specimens that I remember, was the Surprise Canyon Supergroup Conglomerate. Now you might think, well, why is it called Surprise Canyon and not Grand Canyon? Because it's in the Grand Canyon, right? Well, that's because Surprise Canyon is a paleo canyon that's cut through by the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon cuts through an old paleo canyon, complete with its own tributaries, and its own layers of rock that it cuts through. So, Kent, how did a canyon form in the unlithified rock layers during the flood, only to then be later cut through by your post-flood flood in, again, the unlithified rock layers? I'd be very curious to figure out how that happened.
Good question.
Yeah,
Next
especially
question.
since some of the conglomerates, right? Because a conglomerate is basically a bunch of big stones of different sizes, all mixed together and cemented into one big thing. Some of those conglomerates are from the higher up levels of rock that are surround the Surprise Canyon supergroup, which means those rock layers above the Surprise Canyon supergroup had to have lithified in order to erode away in chunks so that they could fall into Surprise Canyon to form the conglomerate in the first place. So the Surprise Canyon supergroup on its own demonstrates that the Grand Canyon had to be cut through when it was lithified. Period. There are no other options, or at least those layers above it. How you get the layers above it to lithify before the ones below it? I don't know, because lithification happens faster with more pressure. Rocks lower would have more pressure, and so therefore, all things being equal, would tend to lithify faster, which means that almost certainly the entire thing was lithified. It's almost like knowing even a tiny bit, like the amount of stuff you would learn just by looking at the physical Grand Canyon on a trip there, is enough to show that Kent doesn't know what he's talking about, as long as you think about it. This is exhausting. I am definitely going to bed after this.
Okay.
Not formed by the Colorado River. So you need to be able to give, for the quiz, some reasons why we know the Grand Canyon could not have been formed by the Colorado River.
It would have been great if we were given a single one, but here, what does Kent think they are?
There's no delta.
Not all rivers have deltas, and the sediment is right there.
The top is higher than the bottom.
Yep, that's what an uplift does.
Those would be too good enough right there. But the rivers don't flow uphill.
That's the same as your second one, right? What is this Eric Dubé's 100 or 200 proofs that the Earth is not a spinning ball, where more than half of them have already been covered by previous reasons, and it comes out to like maybe 60 proofs, none of which work anyway, but at least there's 60 unique ones. I actually thought about covering Eric Dubé's 200 proofs once, and I was like, this is long and repetitive, and Eric Dubé has one of the most boring speaking voices in the world. If you look closely enough, I think it's still in early access, but I do have a video that uses a clip from his 200 proofs. So, it was basically to demonstrate how stupid an experiment can be, and it was a flat earther dropping different things into a fish tank to see which ones float and which ones don't, and thereby saying that gravity doesn't real, because some things float in a fish tank and other things don't.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is really dumb.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody know what this machine is? This farmer's holding?
That right there is a calf puller. Rosina Keller for $9.99 says, if it helps, Kent just claimed a few days ago that no one knows what protons are made of. We're taking
And
a
I know
drink.
what protons are made of.
It's
Quarks.
quarks and some gluons to stick them together.
Bunch of gluon binding energy.
Mm-hmm.
Got those 3 quarks.
Goodness. Kent. What? How does anyone take that man seriously? I guess you just lived in an isolated situation where you've never met anyone who was sounding smart and confident, saying things that contradicted him. Because both Bent and I took him seriously at one point, and we were both in that situation, right?
Mhm.
So.
I didn't know any better.
Right. So.
This is a calf puller.
Oh, there's Godzilla. Take a drink for Godzilla. By the way, I have switched to ginger beer.
Nice.
Yeah. Which Bent was actually nice enough to fetch for me. Because I was like, I'm not going anywhere. Hey, Bent, you want to get me some soup and some ginger beer?
Sure.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
No problem.
You got me 2 cans of soup and 4 ginger beers.
Mm-hmm.
All
And
right.
saltines.
And saltines. I forgot about the saltines.
It's a come-along, a block and tackle, a come-along attached to a pole. Once in a while, a cow has a hard time having that baby calf, and so they get the calf puller out, hook the cable around the calf's legs, and jack the calf out.
A lot of times it's because the birth is breech, so it's the back legs are coming out first. That's pretty hard for cattle. It's a difficult birth for any mammal other than the few that do breeches normally, like cetaceans. But yeah, Kent is basically right here, so we'll take a drink. It is a calf puller. It is for trouble births to physically winch the calf out. Which doesn't sound like a job I want, but you know what? It's an important job, and I'm glad someone's out there doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Out of the cow. You get a few thousand pounds of pressure on there, that calf comes right out, no problem.
Cows normally give birth standing up, but hey, whatever.
Well, one day this farmer was out pulling a calf with a calf puller. It was a breech birth.
Okay, I'm very sure this is a story that didn't happen, but is he telling this as like a parable? Or is he supposed to be telling this like it's a real thing that happened?
Sounds like he's saying a real story.
All right.
Or at least he's pretending to.
We'll keep going. If it still sounds like it's a real story later on, I'll take a drink for a story that didn't happen. But I interpret this as a parable, right? Like,
okay.
When Jesus says, like, oh, there was a man with 3 servants, and he went away to a faraway country and gave each of them a talent. Like, the fact that there's no, like, names or, like, anything to indicate when this happened, to me says, like, well, this is a parable. Jesus doesn't want you to think that this is a literal thing. He's just telling a story.
Right.
So when he says, like, there was a farmer and a city man, I'm like, it feels kind of parable-ish. Anyway, Dr. Tapioca Weasel has just gifted a Dapper Dinosaur membership, and it went to SLB 2000. Welcome, SLB 2000. And here is a drink for that. Thank you very much, Dr. Tapioca Weasel. Okay.
That means the back feet were coming out first. That's not good. Normally calves are born head first.
Yeah,
but this one, the back feet are coming out first.
Breach,
so the farmer had the calf puller out there and had the cable wrapped around the calf's back legs, and he's trying to pull the calf out of the cow. And a city fella stopped his car to see what on earth is going on. And the farmer said, "Come here, man, I need some help." He said, "I don't know nothing about cows." He said, "Just come give me a hand, would you?" He said, "Okay." So the city fella hopped out of the car, jumped over and helped the farmer pull the calf. He never said a word. He just did what he was told. Well, about 10 minutes later, the calf is fine and the mother's fine, and so they're walking up to the barn, going to get washed up, and the farmer said, "Man, I want to thank you for helping me." The city fella said, "Oh, I was glad to help, glad to help." The farmer said, "Have you ever seen anything like this before?"
Yeah, I think this is more of a parable than it is like a thing that really happened.
That's fair.
The city fella said, "No, sir, I've never seen nothing like this." The farmer said, "Well, do you have any questions?" He said, "Yes, sir. I got one question. It's been bugging me for 10 minutes. The farmer said, "Well, what's your question?" The city fella said, "How fast do you figure that calf was going when it ran into that cow?"
Oh, it was a joke that didn't land. I'll take a drink for that.
What a terrible joke.
Yeah.
No, fella. We are not separating the wreck here. How fast was that calf going? Two people looking at the same thing, and one of them's getting the wrong idea of what's going on.
Yeah, it's almost like if you... Yeah, that's true. It's almost like if you look at the Grand Canyon and you ignore the actual physical features of the Grand Canyon in favor of just superficialities and ignoring actual physics and sedimentology and geomorphology, that you can get the wrong idea because you don't know how to look at the Grand Canyon like an actual geologist with rigor and with data and actually testing hypotheses. Yeah, you can come to different conclusions. So, yeah.
Well, the Bible warned us that was going to happen. In 2 Peter chapter 3, it says, "Knowing this first, there shall come in the last days scoffers." There are people that scoff at the Bible. And it says they're going to walk after their own lust, and they're going to say, "Where is the promise of His coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of the creation. Now that's an important verse. We don't ask you to memorize too many verses for our class here, but I want you to memorize 2 Peter 3:3, 3:4, and 3:5.
Normally you just say 3 through 5. That's just it's just normally how you do it. Sorry about the coughing, guys, but again, not feeling well. Looking forward to the break, honestly.
And we'll put those on the test here. 2 Peter 3:3, 3:4, and 3:5. 3:4 says, the scoffers are going to say, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were. That's a very important phrase. What that means is, the scoffers are going to say, the way things are happening now is the way they've always been happening.
I mean, to some extent that's true. In other ways, it's obviously not true. We haven't always had trains and cars and airplanes and diesel-powered boats. But on the other hand...
I don't think that's scoffing either.
Yeah.
Because it's not scoffing.
Kent is just going to use this to complain about the fact that science has as one of its bedrock assumptions that physics does not vary over space or time. And that physics 200 years ago was the same as physics 2,000 years ago, 2 million years ago, 20 million years ago, 2 billion years ago, whatever. And that physics on Earth is the same thing as physics in Alpha Centauri or in the Sombrero Galaxy or wherever. Physics is just physics. That's really what he's going to end up complaining about. But I think he's going to couch it in a condemnation of uniformitarianism. And if he does, we'll talk about that more when he does it. Also, I've now made a prediction.
Nice.
For instance, they look at Grand Canyon, big old huge slice in the rock, and they notice the river running across the bottom is eating rocks off the bottom. It's eroding it, making it deeper. So they study the canyon for 20 years and say, we calculated over a 20-year span that the Grand Canyon gets deeper about 1/8 of an inch every year. The rock is being worn off. That's probably true. I wouldn't argue about that. And they'll say, see, this canyon is, 6,000 feet deep and at 1/8 of an inch a year. That proves it's, X number zillion years old.
No, actually. Take a drink. Goodness. The Grand Canyon's age was not simply estimated by looking at modern erosion rates and naively carrying them through to the top of the Grand Canyon. For the very important reason, or actually for several very important reasons, one of which is that the erosion rate is not the same everywhere. For instance, over at that Kaibab uplift, the erosion rate is higher because the rock is uplifting, which means that for the water to continue its downward slope, it has to erode faster, which it does. Hillhugger, who's been a member for 12 months and is at the tetrapod level, says AIG are a backpack of bagpipes. Nice. Take a drink.
Yes, they are.
Further, it is currently eroding some of the harder rocks in the entire area, right? So at this point, the Colorado River is down in the, I think it's the Vishnu Supergroup, which is a bunch of like Precambrian volcanic things like schists and whatnot, right? These are some of the hardest rocks. Above it are much softer things like slate, shale, sandstone, limestone, things like that. All of which are much, much softer than most, just cooled lava type rocks. And so it is very obvious to anyone who's a geologist that you can't erode things like schist as easily as you can things like limestone with water. So it is not simply based on, what's the current rate of erosion? Okay, multiply that by as many years as it takes to get to the top of the Grand Canyon. I guess that's how old the Grand Canyon is. No one is doing that. And even if they were, that wouldn't tell you how old the rocks in the Grand Canyon were. Because remember, that's also important. If the Grand Canyon had formed last year, in a year, that wouldn't do anything to change the fact that the Coconino sandstone was laid down in like the Devonian in a desert, right? Like it doesn't help at all. It doesn't change that. It doesn't change anything about the Bright Angel Shale being from the Cambrian like 500 million years ago. Don't quote me on that number. I'm not looking it up right now. But you know what I mean, right? So there's two separate things. There's how long does the canyon take to form? That's one question. It's interesting, and it's obviously longer than the age of the Earth is, according to Kent. But even if it weren't, there's also the problem that the rocks are to be dated independent of the canyon, because they did not form at the same time as the canyon, obviously. In order to erode a rock, the rock has to form first. Otherwise, you're not eroding rock. So, yeah. Dr. Tapioca Weasel has gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships. They went to Maya Atkinson, William Robinson, Darius Tuzinski, I'm sorry if I ruined that, Smitty, and 3-Can Sam. Here come 5 more drinks. 1, 2, 3. That was a little bubbles into the nose. That was a 4 and 5. I will say it does get harsh when the ginger beer bubbles go into your sinus cavity. That's a little.
Oh.
Oof,
that's intense.
Yeah, that's goodness.
Yikes.
Talk about feeling the burn. You know what, though? We're going to take this opportunity to go take a quick break. In the meantime, you guys will be entertained by the musical stylings of Beethoven here. Yeah. And we'll be back in just a few minutes. All right, well, sorry about that. Basically, my broadcasting software decided that while it said that I have a great connection in the green, I was also uploading 0 kbps, which is not what it should be. So then the streaming software crashed. So then I had to forcibly end the task, bring it back up, stream it again, and you all had to refresh. So I have no idea. Let's end this poll though. Take a look at what happened. So, what do we got? Why is the... Come on. Why didn't it show up? Whatever. Oh, there it is. Have you seen the Grand Canyon? No, 39%. Yes, 38%. Turtle, 22%, with 149 votes. Nice. All right, so for those of you who don't know, this channel is almost entirely supported by viewers like you, kind of like PBS. That's honestly why I'm here while I'm ill, is because this channel is something where, like, if I don't do it, I don't get anything out of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
My views go down, my standing in the algorithm goes down, and it can be a long-term hit, right? You think, oh, well, you're just going to miss a few hundred views here or there, or a few thousand views or something. That can cost me thousands and thousands of views over the course of a few months while I try to struggle to get back into the algorithm, back to where I was. So it is... Look, I love this job, and it's the best thing I've done in terms of, you know, my, I guess, job kind of thing, right? It's great. But it is something that I really need support with, because it is not easy to keep a channel going. It is a lot of hard work. There are no sick days. There are no special vacation days. It is what it is. So if anyone wants to help the channel out, then the best way to do that right now is to either join the channel or join the membership thing. So the membership program is down below here in a there's a join button to join the channel. It's right next to my Dapper Dinosaur like profile picture that says join. And yeah, that's one way. There's also the Patreon, which is linked in the description. They both give you early access to videos 4 or 5 months in advance. You can get your name in the credits at certain levels. It's great. If that's not your thing, you can also double check the what do you call that? There's a merch store in the description. There's also an Amazon wish list that mostly just has stuff for me for fun. And if none of that's right, if you don't want to do, if money isn't the kind of thing that you want to do, that's fine. What you can do instead is just, or in addition, do it either way, is like this video, leave comments on my videos, watch a few of my videos in a row, stuff like that, right? That helps a lot. So, yeah. That's all I got for that. So, normally I have a little bit more of an in-depth spiel, but like I said, I am not feeling well today. So, and I did notice that we got 10 new memberships in, so that was from Savage, Ray Comfort, Ray Comfort's editor Cobra, get to 10 memberships. Those went to Theodore, Pitzrack, Sophie Fishbach, Blum666, Rhea Jays, Katie Lewis, Landon Knoll, Naragon, Chelsea Daigle, Javad Khusro, and Draconix, I think. And then, of course, Strawberry Penny has gifted 10 more. So that went to SG Cruitt, Derek Henrik, Jillian Wren, Blaster Master 80, Archer Ams, Eli Smith, Quiet Fern, Des Cartage Studios. Sorry about that. Ivan Petrov. Maybe it is Ivan Petrov. You know what? It's because like a Russian name. Probably about, yeah. Tim S. I think that's it. So we got 20 drinks to take.
Oh, God.
All right. Let's see how many times the bubbles go into my nose with this ginger beer. All right, here we go.
0.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that is where I switch to the other ginger beer that I went and got during the break. Okay, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. Awesome. And I think that might actually be getting us close to, if not at, the next tutu, which would be next month, Bent. How do you feel about... Or no, sorry, next week.
Next week, yeah.
How do you
fine with that.
feel? Yeah, feeling good about that? Because,
yep.
Let's see. Let's do the math. Almost. We are $13 away from it. So that's pretty close. We could definitely get there. All right, here we go.
Now hold it. You're assuming that what you're watching now, 1/8 of an inch per year, is what's always happened.
Nope, literally no one is doing that. Not a single... Okay. Not a single person. I don't know. Literally no geologists are doing that. How about that?
Yeah.
There might be someone
experts in the field are doing that.
Right. Okay.
Right there is the faulty assumption.
The assumption that no one's making...
99% of that canyon was formed in a couple of days, and the last 1% has been happening over the last 4,400 years since the flood. But they assume what we see today is is the way it's always been happening down through history. That is called Uniformitarianism, which would be a word you need to know.
Oh, I predicted it. Take a drink for prediction.
You sure did.
Fits of Rage just gifted 1 Dapper Dinosaur membership. I like that it still has the S on there. They don't have any code that says if it's only 1, just drop the S. Nice. And that went to Rebecca Schuss. So let's take a... Was it Schuss? Schuss? I'm not really sure. Does it rhyme with house or... Whatever. I'm taking a drink. Look, if I ever mispronounce your name, please let me know. I can't guarantee that I'll always get it right because, I mean, look, there's 108 people here right now. It's a lot of names, but I will try. That's the best I can give you. I will try. For $4.99, Astra Creation Ex Oceano Ryu says, AIG is a bag of bad me's. Ryu means dragon, so, got it. Take a drink there. And does that get us there? It's going to get us at least really close. Oh, we're like $2 away. Okay, here we go.
I think we'll get there.
No, we'll get into that in a second. I'll put it up on the board here. The scoffers, the Bible says, will be willingly ignorant of how God made the heavens and the earth standing out of the water and in the water. We covered that in the previous sessions about what the original creation was like, how that the earth was made with a canopy of water overhead.
No, Kent, that's very obviously describing the ancient Near East cosmology in which the earth is placed in a bubble inside the cosmic ocean with a dome over it that keeps the cosmic ocean out. The dome itself isn't made of ice or vapor. That is an idea that was made up in the 20th century by the earliest generation of creation scientists outside of like Seventh-day Adventism, who were trying to come up with something that didn't sound completely bonkers. Now, of course, we actually have prominent flat earthers out there who are also creationists, so maybe they should have just gone with the flat earth, but whatever. What do I know? Okay, here's more Kent.
And it was in the water and out of the water. And the scoffers are ignorant of the flood, whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. This world was destroyed by a flood. And the scoffers don't want to admit there was a flood because that means, God has the authority to judge his creation.
I Okay, let's take another
I don't
drink.
think that's the reason why.
It's not. Oh, and here's a couple more super chats, which definitely put us over the 2-2 number and the avatar number. So I will be getting together an avatar poll. We're still going to be getting from Dapper Zord or Feather Dapper, because we had 2 Cyber Dappers in a row. No matter who wins, we'll open it back up the next time after this to all 3. Vince O'Connor for $4.99 says, "Let there be 2-2," and there was 2-2. And then Vince O'Connor looked upon the 2-2 he had wrought, and it was good. Strawberry Painting for $10 says, "Young Earth creationists are perfectly fine with uniformitarian assumptions when the answer they get is around 6,000 years, but when anyone else does it, they're ignorant, short-sighted fools. Standards? What are those?" Oh, no, they have standards. They're just double standards. That's the key right there.
Yeah.
Dr. Tapioca Weasel says, "I should make a website." What would be on my website?
I don't know. What would you do with a website? You'd put your videos on it.
I guess.
But you already have that on YouTube.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Send me good ideas for what I would put on my website. All right, here we go.
And he does, folks. This is his world. He can wreck it if he wants. Well, one of the scoffers in the last days was a fellow named James Hutton. In just about every science book, you read something about James Hutton.
For $5 reduce, Tracy Roberts says, "AIG are an always annoying aggregate of agitated asparagi, aggressively aspirating assertive abominations." You know what? Asparagus is close enough. We're going to take a drink for it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think this is the most ginger I've had in a single sitting in my entire life.
Really?
This is a lot of ginger, man.
Yeah.
I don't normally drink back-to-back ginger beers. It's more of a spaced-out kind of thing normally.
Yeah, it is.
He lived in the late 1700s. He wrote a book in 1795 where he said, "I think the earth is much older than everybody says."
Oh, right, the flood thing. Right, we're going to talk about that, and I didn't. Nothing about discovering a worldwide flood would indicate that God has to exist, right? There are potential non-theistic explanations for a worldwide flood that are also possible. So, if evidence of a worldwide flood were found, one, I'd say that probably, at least in the Bayesian sense, is evidence for the veracity of at least some parts of the Bible. I don't think it would be conclusive that those parts of the Bible are true, but it would at least increase the probability of their truth. Second, it wouldn't be sufficient to give everyone who looked at that a reason to believe in God. Further, many geologists are Christians. In fact, Charles Lyell, who Kent also likes to complain about, who basically came up with the idea of uniformitarianism, was a lifelong Christian who was hoping to find evidence of a flood, and who ended up settling on thinking that there must have been a tranquil flood that just didn't leave any evidence in the earth. So,
miracle flood.
Yeah. So it's not that geologists are like, "Oh no, if we say that there was a global flood, and then everyone will have to believe in God, including me." No, first of all, many geologists already believe in God. Second, they already accept various other, both global and local catastrophes, like the ridiculously huge floods that formed the Scablands in Washington, the asteroid impact that ended the Cretaceous, the traps in various places where basically the entire ground just opened up and lava pooled up onto the ground. These are all calamitous events that geologists have no problem with. They also don't invoke God as their explanatory mechanism for any of them, even the Christian ones. So none of that makes any sense. It's just Kent projecting his own ideological insecurities onto scientists who do not share those insecurities.
Now you need to understand the history here. In the late 1700s, of course, we had our American Revolution. The English call it the Rebellion.
Cool.
Had our revolution in 1776 and rebelled against, King George, threw the tea in the harbor, making it unsuitable even for the British to drink. And
that was a joke that didn't land. Personally, I would have just taken the tea, right? Like, if you're going to get rid of it anyway, bring it home. Get some free tea out of it.
I'm sure some people did.
Maybe, yeah.
In 1795, James Hutton wrote his book and said, "I think the earth is millions of years old." Now, during this time, almost everybody in America, at least, and in the Western world, believed the Bible. They were strongly influenced by Christianity, and most everybody believed the earth was about 6,000 years old.
No, actually, deism, which is a non-Christian form of theism in which God is more or less inactive in the world, was at its zenith around this time, and a large portion of the population of the Western world, as such as it was at the time, were in fact deists who thought that the world had been set in motion by some deity at some point. They didn't know how long ago, and that deity more or less just kind of left it to its own devices. And their ideas as to whether or not that God had any moral stands that humans should comply with was sort of up in the air. They didn't really care about the age of the earth. That was also up in the air. And also, most Christians were more or less ambiguous about the age of the earth. There was not a lot of literature about how old the earth is, even in the sense of just everyone confirming a roughly 6,000-year-old earth. It just wasn't there. It wasn't a big question that Christians were apparently asking themselves in the 18th century. Like, just not there. Christians, by and large, have never really cared much about the age of the earth until the Seventh-day Adventists, with Ellen G. White, had her vision, dream, whatever it is, where she had the literal truth and the date of 6,000 years from the calculation of Bishop Ussher confirmed to her via her prophetic powers. And that became a big distinctive of Seventh-day Adventism. And then later on, in the 20th century, when the fundamentalist movement in Protestantism in the United States is forming, it actually starts off with a lot of explicit ambiguity about the age of the earth. If you look at the earliest fundamentalist writers, when they talk on the age of the earth, they're just like, I don't know, that doesn't really matter. The age of the earth could be whatever. But then, as the idea of biblical literalism starts to become ever more prominent within fundamentalist circles, they see that the Seventh-day Adventists have, from what their perspective is, a very literalist reading of Genesis. And so that starts to be adopted into the fundamentalist movement. Until today, it's more or less standard. It's very hard to find a fundamentalist Christian who does not agree with Seventh-day Adventist style young earth creationism. Even though, in most other aspects of their theology, they keep the Seventh-day Adventists at extreme arm's length, and most fundamentalists are hesitant to even allow the term Christian to be applied to the Seventh-day Adventists. Yeah. So, yeah, it's the history of the young earth creationist movement is not at all what Kent seems to think it is, which is basically that Christians were always young earth creationists until Hutton and Lyell and Darwin messed everything up. It's just not true.
So James Hutton comes along and says, I think it's millions of years old. Well, that was a pretty new...
Actually, James Hutton said that he couldn't put an upper age on the age of the earth, but that it was at minimum millions of years old. So he didn't actually say it was millions of years old. He said it was from millions of years old to basically infinite past. Because he didn't see any evidence of a start point. The deepest rocks he could find, the oldest rocks he could find, seemed to have an evident history before their formation. So, therefore, the Earth extended back further in time than the oldest rocks he could find. So he couldn't find an upper age.
Thought, and not many folks believed it. Also during this...
I mean, most geologists believed him, although the term geologist wasn't really a thing, but most naturalists studying geology believed him.
Time of the end of the 1700s and early 1800s, there were many revolutions going on. There were countries rebelling against the idea of a monarchy, a king. We had the American Revolution, the French Revolution.
Okay, the United States did not rebel against the idea of monarchy, right? In fact, after the Revolution, many people wanted to make George Washington the first king of the United States. The idea of having a non-monarchy representative republic was something that was proposed. But you gotta remember, if this is a war against monarchism overall, then why the heck did they try to make the most prominent general in the war the King of America? That's not what you do when you're an anti-monarchist. Goopdo3 for $2 says, everything changed when the Darwin Nation attacks. I love that. Thank you. Now, were there anti-monarchists? Yes. Can the American Revolution be reasonably made out to be one? No. Savage Ray Comfort's editor, Cobra, says, how much you want to bet that Kent would venerate common sense and the American crisis without knowing that Paine also wrote The Age of Reason? Oh yeah, I'm sure he is a selective, shall we say, fan of Thomas Paine. Okay, so the American Revolution, we'll do a little history thing for those of you who might not be familiar, since, did you know that there are dozens of people who are from countries other than the United States, Spence?
Really?
Yeah, dozens.
Dozens. Wow, that's a lot.
It's true. Many dozens, in fact. So they might not be as familiar with the American Revolution as the average citizen of the United States. So the actual main political push for the revolution was that one of the principles of taxation in the United Kingdom had long been that in order for a tax to be levied against a group, that group had to have representation in Parliament to assent to the taxation proposed by the king. Tracy Roberts for $5 review says, but Darwin was bombed in World War II. Might be a different Darwin. And so the American colonists did not have representatives in Parliament. And so they said, hey, if you're going to tax us to pay for things like the French and Indian War, which was a war waged against France and their Native American allies in what now like the Northeast United States and Canada, then we need to have parliamentary representation so that we can consent to this taxation. That's where you get the no taxation without representation that you still see in bumper stickers in Washington, D.C., because the residents of Washington, D.C. do not have any representative in the legislature of the United States of America and yet are still subject to taxes.
Oops.
So, anyway, that was the big push. And when King Charles said, lol, no, I'm going to tax you anyway, what are you going to do about it? And we're like, well, we're just not going to pay, and we'll form our own country with whiskey and blackjack. And he was like, okay, let's send in the troops. And then there was a big dust-up, as you might say. And in the end, the British went home, only to come back a little while later, burn down most of Washington, D.C., and then go home again, having once again failed to successfully take back control of the American colonies. With the D.C. thing, amusingly enough, they thought that sacking the capital would do something, and instead, the entire government apparatus of the United States just, moved, and we're like, nope, we don't actually care about the capital so much, it's just a place. We're going to continue conducting government operations. And, then the British were like, damn, it didn't work. Oops. Strawberry Pain for $5 says, maybe if they made George Washington king, he'd still be alive today. What do you mean, he'd still be alive today? He is still alive today. Gotta pay attention. He was found frozen in the Potomac. Still alive. People need to watch their Mr. Manticore. Here we go. Now that we've had just a completely off-topic history lesson about how the United States did not start as an anti-monarchy rebellion, here's more Kent.
The Spanish, the Polish, the Italian, the German. What was happening was people were throwing off the king as a form of government.
Italy was literally uniting under a monarchy at this time. Come on, man.
Government. Now, the Tsar in Russia was the equivalent to a king up until 1917, right? Russia kind of escaped this. They kept their monarchy intact, long after the European revolutions were going on, but many countries were having revolutions to get rid of the king. They thought...
the biggest one was France, but yeah. In fact, you might notice that many European countries where this supposed push to get rid of the kings that was happening everywhere still have kings. There's a king of Sweden, there's a king of England, there's a king of Spain. There's lots of kings left.
We ought to have a different form of government called a democracy. And here the Bible says you should honor the king. And so some people thought the Bible was an obstacle to their political objectives.
Now, I wouldn't say that that's impossible. And in fact, if you look at the French Revolution with its anti-clericalism and basically anti-religious stances, that does seem to be a thing. But I'm not aware of a lot of literature from the time, and I have read a fair bit of it, saying, no, specifically, we got to get rid of the Bible. Instead, it was a lot of times we have to get rid of the priestly class because they hold an inordinate amount of power over the people. And that's one of the reasons why priests and monastics were especially in revolutionary France, kind of exterminated. Like, it was a really tough time to be a religious person in France. So, Captain Ryder says the German emperor. Yeah, I mean, the German emperor persisted into the 20th century because there was still a Kaiser for World War One. Now, granted, his absolute monarchy, which really the German Empire didn't really ever have a full absolute monarchy, but yeah, his power had waned. But still, yeah, the German emperor lasted until into the 20th century.
So, like this textbook says, only a
Savage Ray Comfort's editor, Cobra, for $5 says, Greece, Norway, Serbia, Italy. What do these places have in common with the 19th century? I mean, I know that today none of them have a king or a queen. Actually, I'm not so sure about Norway. I know Serbia and Italy don't, though, and Greece. Oh, hey, Vishanti's here. Vishanti, did you... You know what? I'm not going to say, because I don't want to give away personal things. I'll talk to you later.
Many people thought the Earth was only a few thousand years old.
Oh, okay. Well, that answers my question. When Vishanti says, I'm on a plane and also sick. This sucks. I was going to ask if she'd landed yet. Apparently, one, no. And she's also sick. Yeah, we were talking about that earlier today. We're both not feeling well.
Ooh, it's not good.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in the 1700s, a Scottish scientist named James Hutton estimated the Earth was much older. He used the...
Norway still has a king? That's why I was like, I don't know about Norway. Okay. I can't remember the form of government of every country, guys. Good job Good job to the King of Norway. I'm sure you're doing a great job. I actually don't know. He might be a terrible, terrible person. I know that the last emperor of Japan was actually a well-respected biologist who wrote like dozens and dozens of big papers in biology. He was actually a very famous scientist, independent of his fame for being the emperor of Japan, which, hey, you know what? I appreciate it when someone who doesn't have to contribute to society, who could just sit around doing nothing, actually chooses to go out there and do something that actually helps the world, right? Like, you're the emperor of Japan. You could do literally anything. You could just lounge around all day eating, like, fugu sushi or something. But instead he was like, no, I'm going to be one of the best biologists in history. Hey, sounds cool. He was specifically a marine biologist, says Alex Marco. Okay. And Verdatum says, Norway is among the happiest countries, so that's nice. Now, I will say, I'm a little suspicious of some of those because that's self-reporting, and different cultures have different levels of stigma or praise or whatever reported to different amounts of self-reported happiness. So, for instance, there are cultures where complaining is basically like the national pastime, and you're supposed to report that you're miserable because, people like to complain and whatnot. And there are other places where reporting that you're not doing too well is seen as sort of like there's a bit of a stigma attached to it, so people over-report their happiness. So, while I don't reject self-reported happiness surveys, I do take them with a grain of salt. So, there you go.
Principle of uniformitarianism. There's the word you need to know. Uniformitarianism means the way things are happening now is the way they've always been happening. The slogan is often put like this: the present is the key to the past. And that's what they say. Uniformitarian means the present is the key to the past. In other words...
So, here's the thing. Uniformitarianism is no longer in operation in geology. Geology currently operates under something called actualism, which acknowledges that there have been, and will again be, catastrophes which have greatly impacted the geology of the Earth, and that some things cannot be explained by current processes, even things that weren't catastrophic. So, for instance, in the Proterozoic and earlier rocks of the Earth, we have this formation called banded iron, which cannot occur in the presence of high amounts of atmospheric oxygen. Now, they're not catastrophic, right? Because they're primarily sedimentary, and they don't show evidence of always being super high energy deposition. I'm sorry. So that means that they had to form in a manner that we cannot see today. But we can use physics and chemistry to figure out the manners in which they could form, and turns out to be non-catastrophically. On the other hand, when you come to things like the impact crater around the Yucatan, it's pretty hard to get a non-catastrophic impact crater. What would that even mean?
Right.
So, yeah, that's catastrophic. And the resulting things like the worldwide iridium layer also explained via the same catastrophe. So, uniformitarianism, one, not really a thing in modern geology, and two, only applied ever to geology. No one was talking about uniformitarianism in biology or astronomy. It was a principle in geology. So, yeah.
If Grand Canyon's getting deeper a little bit every year, well, then that's the way it's always been happening.
Nope, no one ever said that. Take note.
Actually, the Bible is the only reliable key to the past. But
let's just take it.
One of these scoffers, James Hutton, wrote his book, and he kind of developed this idea of uniformitarianism. Now, a young lawyer from Scotland named Charles Lyell.
Remember, lifelong Christian. Devout Christian his entire life, down to his deathbed. Let's just keep that in mind.
Read that book and became very influenced by it.
That's true. We'll take a drink.
Charles Lyell, and you need to know his name. Charles Lyell, the Scottish lawyer, hated the Bible. He lived in the early 1800s.
Yes, Charles Lyell, famously a lifelong devout Christian, hated the Bible. The man who set out to find evidence for the flood, and when he failed, said, well, there must have been a flood, but it must have been tranquil. That guy hated the Bible. I'm just taking a drink. It's always especially galling to me when people lie about the dead, basically, right? You get people who are like, don't speak ill of the dead. No. Don't speak lies of the dead, right? Don't lie about them. If it is true that they did some unsavory thing, feel free to talk about it. Like, you're not going to hear me speaking well of, like, Jeffrey Epstein, right? Because we know some of the horrible stuff he got up to. But on the other hand, I'm not going to say Jeffrey Epstein was a cannibal. There's no evidence of that. No one has ever suggested that he was a cannibal. Fits of Rage says getting generous when calling drinks when he's drinking health potions. Yeah, basically. Yeah, that's... Look, the ginger makes me feel better. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't. So, yeah, that's definitely part of it. Oh, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, right. So, if you're going to talk about someone like Charles Lyell, who's been dead now for over 100 years, right? Just tell the truth about him. You don't have to like him. You don't have to say nice things about him. If you're going to say he hated the Bible, you better be able to back that up, because everything anyone knows about Charles Lyell indicates that he was a lifelong Christian who would have loved nothing more than to find a clear marker for a Noah's flood. Like, yeah. All right, here we go.
1800s, he read James Hutton's book and was influenced by it. Charles Lyell wrote this book, Principles of Geology. I've got all 3 volumes of his all thoroughly marked up in my library, but...
Kent, you are functionally illiterate. I think you might have them in your library, but I very much doubt that you thoroughly marked them up.
Maybe he highlighted the picture.
Yeah, maybe.
In this book, written in 1830, Charles Lyell is the primary fellow responsible for developing what is called the geologic column. Yeah, and in his book, basically, he mocks Scripture. Now, you have to understand...
citation, please. Do you have a location where he did this? Which volume, which page? No? No? I very much doubt he did, but I'm not going to go dig through Principles of Geology right now. If anyone has a citation for where Charles Lyell mocked the Bible, please let me know.
During the early 1800s, most people believed the Bible, so you had to be careful if you were going to attack the Bible. You didn't just come out and blast it like the atheists did last night on the radio program, and the calls you got last night, Marlissa, on the skeptics calling in saying, oh, you're so stupid to believe the Bible. Back in 1800, man, you didn't do that, because 99% of the population believed the Bible.
That's not true. It's not even close to true. Ben, have you ever heard of the Jefferson Bible?
Yes.
Would you like to explain the basics of what that
Isn't
is?
that the Bible, but all the miracles have been removed?
Yes, by Thomas Jefferson. He literally cut them out with a knife.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But I know he had edited the Bible to make it seem more natural.
Yeah.
And less miraculous.
Now, why did Jefferson do this? Well, because he was a deist, like a whole bunch of other people at the time. This was just not the peak of Christian acceptance in Europe that Kent wants to pretend it is. Vishanti, member for 25 months, and at the Tetrapod level says Bible attackers. So anyway, I started blasting. Oh, Frank Reynolds.
So you would blast Christians and you wouldn't have any friends left.
Oh.
So the way he did it was interesting. He used scoffing to scoff at the Scripture. For instance, on page 30 he said, they reach false conclusions and futile reasoning and ancient doctrines sanctioned by the implicit faith of many generations and supposed to rest on scriptural authority.
Okay, I don't see where this is mocking the Bible. This is mocking the futile reasoning and ancient doctrine, which they think is, which again, sanctioned by the supposed, all the stuff, and supposed to rest, which means he doesn't think it does rest on scriptural authority. See, that supposed there is doing a lot of work. And I'm guessing, I'm not going to double check, but I'm guessing that in between those ellipses are even more things that make it clear that Charles Lyell is not mocking the Bible. What he is doing is he is saying that people who are taking the Bible overly literally and as their guide to science are thereby being misled because they're following ancient doctrines and their supposed interpretation of the scriptures. Goopdo3 for $2 says, I hear Dapper hated Power Rangers. I mean, it's going to depend on what season. I tried to watch some Power Rangers Samurai the other day, and I couldn't make it through the first episode. It's so bad. The writing is so bad. And the acting is not very good either, but like you can make up for a lot of bad acting with some decent writing. And like, no, they didn't. It's a rough season. So I mean, that and Super Samurai. But they're together the length of a normal Power Ranger season, so like I just treat them all as one season. Whatever.
This is a backhanded way of poking fun at the scriptures for those
It's literally not, Kent.
idiots who dare to believe the Bible. He said on page 41, this other guy remarked how much the interests of religion, now watch this phrase carefully, the interests of religion as well as those of sound philosophy had suffered. In other words, religion and sound philosophy suffer when you mix them together.
No, when you mix them together with sacred writings about questions about physical science, Kent. It's on your slide. I'm taking a drink.
It's just the rest of the sentence, that's all.
Right. And this is just echoing St. Turtle of Hippo when he said that there are people who make Christians out to be idiots by saying that the scriptures say things about the physical world that everyone else only has to look around to see aren't true. Right? Because they know from their experience and their reason that these conclusions that this person is drawing from the scriptures aren't true. Charles Lyell is just doing the same thing. He's like, look, man, if all you do is take your interpretation of the Bible and ignore anything about natural science, the physical world, you're going to interpret the Bible wrong. And you're going to mix them up. And it's going to be to the detriment of the religion and science, which is what sound philosophy he's talking about. You know, natural philosophy, which is what they called science at the time. That's what he's doing there. And it's just in the quotation. Right? It's just right there. I hate it when they put up things that debunk them on their own slideshow.
What's he trying to say here? You mean you can't have religion and believe the Bible and also have sound philosophy?
No, that's literally not what he's saying. God damn, I'm taking a drink.
Too many big words for Kent.
My goodness. This right here is why I say Kent, I think, is functionally illiterate.
Well, he reads what he wants to read.
Yeah. I guess.
That's what he's trying to imply.
No, it's
by
not.
perpetually mixing up the sacred writings with questions in physical science. Here is where, and they do this today, they try to make it look like the Bible and science cannot be put together. Well, no, the Bible and science get along fine. The Bible and evolution do not get along fine.
I don't care. If you think that evolution doesn't get along with the Bible, that makes the Bible wrong, not evolution. Here's the thing. The Bible only exists because of the physical world. There was a physical world before the Bible. The Bible wouldn't exist were it not for the physical world. And there's a chance that the physical world will go on past the Bible. Because there's always that chance that, in fact, no, there is no final judgment coming. And over the course of time, humans will go extinct. Every trace of their civilization will be wiped away. And at that point, there will definitely be no Bible. If you have a conflict between what you think the Bible says and what reality indicates, it's reality that wins. You have two options. You can reject the Bible, or you can change your interpretation of it. That's it. And the thing is, Christians have already done this by and large, right? Like, the Bible indicates the earth is flat. Christians don't care. They're almost all globe earthers. The Bible indicates that the earth is the center of the universe, and the sun goes around the earth. Christians don't care. They pretty much all got on board with heliocentrism. The Bible says that sympathetic magic can affect the genetics of cattle or goats. Christian farmers have not been caring about that for a long time. There aren't too many Christian farmers out there being like, oh, I bet I can get a cooler coat pattern if I put some funny sticks next to my cattle or goats while they drink. They're by and large not out doing that, right? If you take the Bible literally, it means pi is 3. Check it. It's not. Christians have found ways to overcome all of these things while remaining Christians, and found ways to allegorize, or in some other way, not take a woodenly literal reading of all the passages that imply these things. Right? They'll go with phenomenology, or they'll say that the Bible doesn't have to give exact values. They can round to. Things like that. Which is, I don't care, fine. Have fun with that. I would much rather you do that than that you are an anti-science weirdo. But yeah, when physical reality and the Bible, as you interpret it, conflict, physical reality wins.
But by saying the Bible and science don't get along, they're trying to imply that evolution is part of science. And
so that idea is from the conflict theory of the relationship between science and religion. That is a 20th century idea. I can guarantee you that in the 19th century, Charles Lyell was not a part of the conflict theory of the relationship between science and religion, because it hadn't been invented yet. In fact, I have a lot of beef with the conflict theory because it engendered a lot of silly historical myths, like that Christopher Columbus is the first person to show the Europeans that the Earth is round. He wasn't. Everyone in Europe who had even a modicum of education knew the Earth was a globe. Or that Galileo was put under house arrest for heresy. Kind of was, but it wasn't that he was promoting heliocentrism. It was that he had lied about having his book approved by the censors. Granted, I don't think that's okay either, but it's not for the heliocentrism part. In fact, even the Pope was a fan of heliocentrism. Or that, there's a whole bunch of them, right? They're just not true.
it's not. 41, he reasoned philosophically against those who regarded the disordered state of Earth's crust as exhibiting signs of the wrath of God for the sins of man. And of course, if you look at the world from a biblical perspective, you see the flood in the Bible, and you look at the Grand Canyon, you say, wow, that's the wrath of God for the sins of man.
I mean, it would have to be a miracle for that to be the result of the flood, so I guess maybe you're willing to just import infinite miracles to explain the Grand Canyon via something that could not physically form it. Sure, why not? But at that point, you're not doing science. You're just doing make-believe, which is fine. Just don't pretend otherwise.
But some people don't want you to look at the world and see the wrath of God for man's sin, because then you might end up getting saved.
You know, I feel like a lot of people who currently don't believe in God would, if presented with compelling evidence of the truth of the flood narrative, and compelling evidence that it was in fact the God of the Bible who, caused that flood, would simply believe in that God. Right? Like,
yeah, if there's evidence there, it seems likely to believe in it.
Yeah, and so I actually don't think there's a big contingent of people who are like, oh, we can't let this be evidence of the flood, because then God might be real. I feel like most people, if they thought that God was real, would just believe in God. Right? Like, why wouldn't you?
I would.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that if someone presented me with very, very unshakable evidence that was very, very likely to indicate the existence of a God, that I would be a lifelong theist, and there's very little you could do to change that. Now, I'm not saying whether or not I am a theist. I'm just saying that no matter what, that would definitely incline me more towards theism than less. So, I don't know. And I wouldn't be upset about it. Like, oh, darn, there's a God out there? Oh, man. Darn it. Now I have to change almost nothing about my life, is basically the answer to that.
Right.
And so the devil has got a lot of folks looking at Grand Canyon saying, wow, that took millions of years of evolution. And that way
I'm just going to drink for him not knowing what evolution is.
Right. It's not evolution, Kent.
It is not. Yeah, as Captain Ryan also points out, when I am seeing all the cute, beautiful, feathered, bird-like dinos and their evolution, I see the hand of God. Yes, even evolution, is evidence of God for me. Shocking? Yeah, that's another thing, is it's like lots of theists are perfectly happy seeing the glory of God in the natural history of the earth as it actually occurred. And I am not here to argue with them. I think that's great. If that's one of your takeaways, as long as you're not doing anti-science, then awesome. Please stick with it. I am not here to convert you to or from any religion, or even philosophical stance on the nature of or existence of God or gods, even if there isn't an attendant actual religion. Like, just not what I'm here for. Be a theist, be an atheist, be an agnostic, be a misotheist. I just don't care. Be an apatheist. I guess by that standing, I'm kind of acting like an apatheist. Not that I'm saying I'm that either.
they miss an important object lesson to remind them of the wrath of God on the sins of man. So Lyle here is mocking this idea. He talked about religious prejudices. If you believe the Bible, you're prejudiced.
Kent, I'm sure I could identify things that you think of as religious prejudices, right? Like, I'll bet you think that all those Muslims who won't convert to Christianity because they think they have the final revelation from God and that it poo-poos some of the distinctive beliefs of Christianity, I'll bet you would say that that is based on a religious prejudice. That they are prejudiced against the evidence of the deity of Christ and the Trinity and whatnot.
I want to know why he puts 5 words there out of context. You can't even put a full sentence.
Yeah, it is weird.
He said, men of superior talent, he's talking about himself, who thought for themselves. Now, what do you mean by this? If you think for yourself, you will be of superior talent. And he said, and they were not
no, you've reversed the causal order there. Men who are of superior talent can think for themselves is the only causal order there. And what thinking for yourself means, at least in this context, is not starting with a conclusion and then finding evidence for that conclusion and ignoring counter evidence. This is Charles Lyell basically saying, hey, we should use science to answer scientific questions. We shouldn't start with a conclusion that we're not allowed to deviate from. We should go where the evidence leads. Here we go.
blinded by authority like the Bible. This is another one of those backhanded jabs trying to say, well, if you believe the Bible, you don't know how to think for yourself.
Note that Kent added, like the Bible. He did it inappropriately because it should be in brackets, not in parentheses. But, for instance, up there where he says, like himself,
Right.
obviously that's not something that Charles Lyell wrote. Which means that Kenton, which means that when we're talking about Kent's quotations, parentheses can be treated like brackets. So, in fact, Charles Lyell had a much wider set of ideas to criticize than just the Bible. For instance, earlier ideas about Earth history that he thought were erroneous were often accepted by authority. And the intelligentsia of Europe had a long history of simply accepting things because some ancient philosopher had said them. That was one of the reasons why it was hard to get away from Aristotelian astronomy. It's because, well, Aristotle said it. Who are you to go up against Aristotle? It's like, I don't know, someone who knows more, because we've been gathering data for thousands of years. Nah. You disagree with Aristotle. Probably just wrong. Okay, that's not biblical authority, but it was still a very, very operational set of ideological authority in Europe at the time. So the Bible is in there, sure, but so are a lot of other things. And remember, Charles Lyell is talking about science. He doesn't want the Bible to be an authority in science. He himself maintained that it was an authority in theology for his entire life, because, again, lifelong Christian.
And I get that every week in debates and in call-in talk shows and stuff with us. Oh, you believe the Bible, you don't know how to think for yourself, huh? Well, yes, I do know how to think for myself. And I think I've studied it very carefully in the Bible.
I will also say, I do not think it's fair to say that anyone who believes in the Bible in some capacity does not think for themselves. Many people who do also do not think for themselves, but also many people who don't believe it also don't think for themselves, right? It's not a dichotomy. The Christians don't think for themselves. All that everyone else does. Or maybe the religious people don't think for themselves, but all the irreligious people do. That's not a fair way to characterize it either.
Is absolutely right. Simple as that, okay? Lyell said his goal was to free the science.
Yeah, as Robert Adsit says, Galen was the authority on anatomy. Yep. And I mean, to be fair, Galen probably got more right than Aristotle. But, didn't get everything right.
From Moses. What's he mean by that, you think?
It means he wants you to stop looking at Genesis when you're trying to interpret rocks, and simply interpret the rocks as they come to you. That's what he means.
Most scientists in this time...
Sorry, yeah. Say that again?
It means the Bible's not a science book.
Exactly.
Were Christians.
A lot of them were deists. A lot of them were sort of wishy-washy, not particularly Christianish theists of some stripe or another. There was a lot of variety going on at the time.
They thought science got along just fine with the Bible.
Actually, a lot of them didn't. That's why this whole thing was happening. This whole scientific revolution, where we say, maybe our interpretations of the Bible should be subject to what we can learn from the physical world, rather than the other way around. The time was basically right for that kind of thing, because it was also around various Enlightenment periods, where people were saying, hey, we should use evidence and reason to conduct our affairs and to form our beliefs, rather than simply the religious traditions of our ancestors. It was not a rejection of religion wholesale, but it was an attempt to take the final authority in intellectual matters and in learning from the priests and philosophers and bring it to the evidence. So, DM wears the butter's wing. No, I'm pretty sure my heart creates blood and it disappears at my fingertips. Yeah, that's a Galenism. I'm pretty sure it doesn't. I'm pretty sure you have both arteries and veins, but I don't know for certain. So, but actually, we're gonna start calling it here. I'm gonna go to bed. Bence, do you have anything you want to tell people about before we get out of here?
Yeah, I'll plug some things. Power Rangers Jungle Beast on Top Hats off tomorrow night. I'd love to see you there.
That is the plan, assuming that I'm not ill.
That's true.
If I'm like this, the answer is no. But yeah, hopefully.
And I have an Amazon wish list, and it has Pop-Tarts on it, and I like Pop-Tarts. And I have a Patreon, and there's music in the description. If you want a link to the music, you can download it for free.
Sir Equinox, you are in fact the one who was pushing the revisionist history about Galileo. The idea that Galileo was punished for his scientific ideas was not current until after the conflict theory of science and religion gained traction. You can just check the documents involved. He was punished specifically for lying to a publisher or printer about whether or not his book had passed by the censors. And he was also punished for going against the wishes of the person who had commissioned his book, or the entity which had commissioned his book, which was in fact the church, who had commissioned a survey of all of the cosmological models then in circulation among, the astronomers and whatnot. And to not promote his ideas, which at the time, by the way, were less well evidenced than the geoheliocentric model, as if they had already been demonstrated, and that others were less well evidenced. Instead, he wrote a book almost entirely just about heliocentrism, which was not what he was asked to do, and then lied about it, having passed the censors. I don't think that's an appropriate reason to put someone under house arrest, but it's what happened. In fact, he gave many audiences to high-ranking cardinals and the Pope about heliocentrism, which were well received, and nothing in our records indicate anything about him being asked to recant his heliocentrism. Sorry. Also, a note about the idea of revisionist history. That's what historians do. We check to see if we got it right previously. Right? When a historian comes to some topic, the possibility that previous historians were wrong always has to be there. Revising our accounts of history is basically the goal of historians. So, while it has since then had sort of the phrase had its reputation tainted by things like Holocaust revisionists, who want to revise things like death counts or the motive or even the existence of extermination camps, they do that contra the evidence, whereas a good historian tries to revise the historical record with newer or better data or more consistent interpretations of the data that already exists. So, one, don't use revisionist history as a slur. It's not. This is what historians do. Two, you're simply incorrect, and historians are just by and large on my side on this. Essentially, every historian of the church or the Galileo affair is on my side. It's really only edgelord atheists who aren't, and people who've been duped by them. And three, just check with other sources, man. It's just a thing. That being said, let's see what's coming up here. Vishanti sends a dapper with like a ramen emoji and some sick emojis. Yeah, I already had some chicken noodle soup. All right. So on Thursday, we are going to be having something. It's a video. I think it's part 3 of the Grady McMurtry. Strawberry Pain for $2 says, "Feel better, Dapper Heart. I command it. Obey me." All right, I'll do what I can. It is. What is a pelvis? Grady McMurtry gets everything wrong. 3 of 4. I'm hoping that on Wednesday we can play Power Rangers. I can't guarantee it based on how I feel right now. And then on Saturday, this is Saturday the 9th of September 2023, we should be doing another Dapper Reacts. With that, everybody, I'm going to say goodnight. I hope all of you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I hope to see all of you on Thursday.
Bye.
Hey, before you leave, I just want to take a second to thank my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or above. Benthoven, Tapioca Weasel, Whispers, Kelvin Brostick Van Manen, Denny5252, Elaran Teller, Phil Rivara, Ian Chen, Landon Knoll, Mabbity Babby, Monkey They Them, Mrs. Spexinder, The Venerable Bede, Sphincter of Doom, and Starrunner. It's because of my channel members and patrons whom you're seeing on screen that this channel can stay afloat. Without you, it would all shut down. If you want to join the team, there's a link to join the channel below this video, and there's a link to join the Patreon in the description. On the Patreon, you can get a 10% discount for pledging annually, and either way, you get early access to virtually all of my scripted videos, often 3 to 5 months before they come out for the general public. Thanks for watching.